The Galactic Council chamber was a monument to arrogance. The dome, made of translucent ether glass, hovered over the infinite abyss of deep space, casting eerie reflections of the councilors seated in their exalted thrones. Towering figures of alien aristocracy, scaled, furred, and exoskeletal, observed the lone human standing before them, with expressions ranging from disdain to amusement. High Commander Verk Zirin of the Zarth Dominion, his reptilian hide shimmering under the soft glow of the chamber's luminescent panels, leaned forward, his eyes slitted and cold, locked onto the human general standing defiantly before him. "Your species," he began, his voice a guttural hiss, "is an anomaly, primitive yet stubborn. You wield steel-clad relics while the galaxy marches forward in technological supremacy. And yet you humans call yourselves warriors." General William Carter, a man whose mere presence demanded respect, remained unmoved. His sharp-lined face showed no flicker of emotion. The silence stretched, the tension thickening like the void between the stars. Every council member in attendance knew what this was, another moment in the long-winded tradition of humiliating species too weak to resist their inevitable assimilation. Verk smirked, exposing a row of serrated teeth. "Your outdated military doctrine, your crude combustion engines, your tanks," he scoffed. "Do you truly believe such antiquated weapons can withstand the might of the Galactic Dominion?" Carter's gaze was unwavering. "We do." Laughter rippled through the chamber. A blue-skinned Carry Noble chuckled, his cybernetic implants flashing as his hulking forearm pounded a meaty fist against the stone slab of his seat. Even the stoic enecto-hierarchs of the Zyra's collective clicked their mandibles in amusement. Verk's amusement faded. "You speak with conviction, General. I admire that," he said. "But conviction does not stop an orbital bombardment. It does not pierce through plasma shields. Your people have delayed submission long enough." His clawed fingers drummed against the armrest of his throne. "Thus, we shall settle this as warriors through battle. We will deploy the Dominion's finest war machines against yours. A contest, if you will. Let the galaxy witness your species' final, desperate struggle." Carter did not respond immediately. He took a measured breath, his steely blue eyes surveying the grotesque assembly of galactic warlords and politicians. This was not about war, it was a spectacle. An execution dressed as entertainment. "A demonstration, then," he said, his voice devoid of fear. "On a battlefield of your choosing." Verk grinned. "Indeed. A remote colony world uninhabited. Your finest ground forces against ours. We will crush you in hours." A faint smirk touched Carter's lips, though it did not reach his eyes. "Then I assume you won't object to us bringing a few of our old relics?" Laughter boomed through the chamber. "Bring whatever you like, human. It will make no difference." The meeting concluded, and Carter strode out, his back unbowed. He walked through the cold metallic halls of the Council Space Station, flanked by his aides. As soon as they were clear of the chamber, Major Alex Kane fell in step beside him, his face set in grim determination. "They're underestimating us." "That's their first mistake," Carter replied. Kane, a veteran of countless battles and built like a tank himself, broad-shouldered, scarred, and always ready, nodded. "What's the plan?" Carter's lips curled slightly. "We give them exactly what they asked for. We roll in with our best." Kane exhaled sharply, already knowing what that meant. The Abrams. A younger officer, Lieutenant Jason Briggs, a former street racer turned tank driver, let out a low whistle. "The old war horses against their fancy hovercraft and plasma weapons?" Carter stopped walking and turned to face his men. "Tell me, Briggs, when was the last time an Abrams failed to do its job?" Briggs hesitated. "Never, sir." "Damn right," muttered Sergeant Thomas Maddox, their tank gunner. His callous fingers flexed as if itching to fire rounds. "Plasma shields? Whatever they got, kinetic energy still kills." Corporal Elliot Hayes, the quietest of the group but the deadliest loader anyone had ever seen, simply nodded. Kane crossed his arms. "So, what's the real play? We can't just rely on the Abrams alone." Carter's gaze was calculating. "We won't. But they don't know that yet. He gestured toward the viewport, where the distant shape of Earth shimmered against the blackness of space. The Council sees us as weak because we fight differently. They don't understand that wars aren't won by technology alone. They're won by will, by strategy, by knowing when to let the enemy think they have you. Maddox cracked his knuckles. Sounds like we're about to teach some aliens a history lesson. Briggs chuckled. Hope they brought notebooks. Kane's expression remained serious. We'll be outnumbered, outgunned, no air support, just us and the machines we trust. Carter nodded. That's all we need. The team exchanged glances, each man reaffirming his place in the fight to come. They had spent years inside the steel walls of their Abrams tanks, forging a bond stronger than any armor plating. And now, they would carry that bond into the most important battle of their lives. Far above them, in the council chambers, Verk watched the human delegation depart. His lips curled into a smirk, convinced of his imminent victory. His warriors would make sport of these so-called soldiers. Their tanks would be reduced to slag beneath the Dominion's hovering war machines. He saw no path for humanity to survive. But in the cold expanse of space, on a distant battlefield yet to be stained with war, the M1 Abrams awaited, and it was hungry. The sky above the barren colony world of Dearest burned with the glow of descending warships. The Galactic Council had chosen this planet for its desolation, a wasteland of cracked earth and jagged cliffs where no civilization had ever taken root. A fitting graveyard, the alien commanders had said, for a species too stubborn to submit. Major Alex Kane sat inside the command hatch of his M1 Abrams, scanning the horizon through his binoculars. Dust storms swirled across the land, whipped up by the thrusters of the Zarth Dominion's hover tanks as they took formation. Unlike the angular armored bodies of Earth's war machines, the Dominion's vehicles are sleek, hovering above the ground with an unnatural grace. Kane muttered. Sergeant Thomas Maddox grinned from his seat at the gunner's station. Makes it easier for us. One good shot and they'll be scrapped. Kane didn't smile. They don't think they need tactics. They think their technology is enough. Corporal Elliot Hayes, silent as ever, loaded a tungsten sabot round into the main gun. The smooth mechanical click settled like a final note of anticipation. The radio crackled. General Carter's voice came through steady and commanding. All call signs, weapons free. Show them what a real war looks like. A distant tremor signaled the beginning of the battle. From the ridgeline ahead, Zarth tanks opened fire, hurling spears of molten plasma toward the human formation. The air shimmered with heat as the first wave of energy blasts seared across the battlefield. Driver, take us left! Kane barked. Maddox's eyes locked onto the lead hover tank. Eyes on that lead hover tank, he said. Briggs yanked the controls, and the Abrams roared forward, treads churning through the dirt. Its heavy frame defied the sleek, floating menace of the enemy. A plasma round slammed into the ground beside them, sending up a plume of melted rock. Inside the tank, the air vibrated from the impact, but the armor held. Maddox adjusted his sights, tracking a fast-moving Zarth war machine. Gotcha, he muttered, squeezing the trigger. The 120mm shell exploded from the barrel, screaming through the air. The enemy's energy shield flared, absorbing part of the impact, but it wasn't enough. The kinetic force punched through, shattering the hover tank in a flash of fire and twisted metal. One down, Briggs whooped. But the enemy was relentless. The Dominion's forces surged forward, firing in coordinated bursts, their weapons cutting through the human ranks. Explosions rocked the ground. A tank to their right took a direct hit, its turret blown clean off. Kane's jaw tightened. Maddox, put more fire downrange! Briggs, don't let them box us in. Another plasma shot grazed their side armor, leaving a molten scar but failing to penetrate. The Abrams shuddered but kept moving. Hayes fed another round into the chamber, smooth and methodical. Maddox swiveled the cannon toward another target. But before he could fire, a Zarth vehicle streaked across the battlefield, moving too fast for conventional targeting. Plasma bolts rained from its twin barrels, one striking the Abrams square in the front. The tank rocked violently, the impact sending Briggs lurching against the controls. Kane grabbed the side rail to steady himself. "Report!" Kane barked. "Front armor took a hit, but we're still rolling," Briggs gritted out, shaking off the impact. "If that's the best they've got, we're going to be just fine," Maddox muttered. Kane scowled, adjusting the targeting scope. "Return the favor." The Abrams surged forward, closing the distance. The enemy tank tried to maneuver, but the Abrams was faster than they expected. Maddox lined up the shot, exhaled, and fired. The round punched through the enemy's core, detonating whatever alien fuel source kept it afloat. The explosion sent debris spiraling into the sky. "These things go down real nice when you put a hole in them," Briggs said, breathing out a sigh of relief. The battle raged on, but something had changed. The Zarth forces, once moving with careless arrogance, were now hesitating. They had expected a slaughter, not resistance. And certainly not the sight of a lone Abrams tank plowing through their formations, crushing debris beneath its treads. A voice crackled over the enemy comms, unintentionally intercepted through the Abrams systems. "Impossible! Their weapons should not be able to breach our—" The voice cut off in static as another Zarth tank went up in flames. Kane smirked. "They're learning." The remaining alien forces began a tactical retreat, hovering back toward the cliffs for cover. It was a clear sign. For the first time, the Dominion wasn't attacking out of confidence. They were responding out of fear. Maddox grinned. "Not so fun when they bleed, huh?" Carter's voice came through the radio again. "All units maintain pursuit. Do not let them regroup." Kane pressed the radio. "Understood, sir." As the Abrams rolled forward, its treads grinding through the remnants of shattered enemy vehicles, Kane knew one thing for certain. The Zarth Dominion had just learned a lesson they would never forget. And this battle was far from over. The battlefield was a graveyard of twisted metal and smoldering wreckage. Blackened husks of Zarth war machines lay scattered across the landscape, their once imposing hover frames reduced to slag. The scent of scorched earth and burning fuel clung to the air, mixing with the acrid sting of plasma residue. The human forces had pushed forward, but the fight was far from over. Inside the Abrams, Major Alex Kane wiped the sweat from his brow. His grip tightened around the edge of the hatch as he surveyed the carnage. The Zarth Dominion had underestimated them once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. A deep, resonating hum echoed across the battlefield. The ground trembled. Kane lifted his binoculars, his gut twisting at what he saw. A behemoth loomed on the horizon, blotting out the already dim sky. A Titan-class siege walker, the Dominion's answer to planetary conquest, towering 100 feet tall. It moved with eerie grace for something so massive, each step sending seismic ripples through the earth. Its armored plating was nearly impervious, glistening with the energy of a constantly shifting plasma shield. Twin rotary plasma cannons whirred to life along its shoulders. And at its center, a siege-grade plasma annihilator pulsed, its glow intensifying as it prepared to fire. Kane exhaled sharply. "All units brace. We've got a serious problem." Lieutenant Jason Briggs adjusted his headset, eyes darting across the battlefield display. "Sir, that thing's got enough firepower to level a city." Sergeant Thomas Maddox let out a low whistle. "And they brought it just for us." "I'm flattered." Corporal Elliot Hayes was already loading a fresh sabot round into the chamber. His expression remained unreadable. They all knew the truth. No single tank had ever gone up against something like this and lived to tell the tale. General Carter's voice crackled through the radio. "Hold your ground. That walker cannot be allowed to reach our forward command." Kane's eyes flicked back to the walker. Even at this distance, it was clear that the Zarth had committed to total annihilation. Their pride had been wounded. This wasn't just about crushing Earth's resistance anymore. This was about making an example out of them. The first shot from the siege walker came without warning. A blinding spear of plasma energy ripped through the battlefield, incinerating 3 human tanks in an instant. The explosion sent a shockwave outward, flipping vehicles like children's toys. The sheer heat of the blast turned the ground to molten slag. "Move! Move!" Kane bellowed. Briggs slammed the controls forward. The Abrams lurched into motion just as another shot vaporized the ground where they had been. The force of the explosion rocked them, but the tank held together. "They're going all in," Briggs growled through gritted teeth, maneuvering the Abrams toward cover. "We can't take a direct hit from that thing," Kane muttered. The Abrams was built for endurance, but nothing short of a fortress could withstand a full-powered siege blast. The only way to win was to get close enough to strike where the armor was weakest. Maddox was already scanning for a target. "Got to be a weak spot. No way that thing's indestructible." Kane weighed their options. The siege walker was slow, its legs heavy and reinforced. But if they could get underneath it. "Briggs, full speed toward that ravine. We need to use the terrain." Briggs didn't hesitate. He gunned the engine, and the Abrams shot forward, kicking up dirt as it barreled toward a natural dip in the landscape. Plasma fire rained down around them, carving deep craters into the earth. Other tanks followed their lead, dodging and weaving through the chaos. But the Dominion wasn't letting up. The air filled with the screams of men over the radio as another wave of human armor was obliterated. Kane clenched his teeth. "We need to take out those legs." Maddox was already adjusting his aim. "Got to get closer." Kane nodded. "Then we get closer." Briggs sucked in a breath. "We're going to die, aren't we?" Kane smirked. "Not today." The Abrams surged forward, weaving through the wreckage of fallen tanks. Every other vehicle was retreating, commanders barking desperate orders for their men to regroup. But Kane and his crew pressed on. Plasma blasts streaked past them, one clipping their side armor, melting part of the plating but failing to penetrate. The siege walker loomed larger with each passing second. It was shifting its cannons, redirecting toward more pressing threats. They had seconds to act. Kane's voice was steady. "Maddox." Maddox lined up his shot, the targeting reticle settling on a vulnerable joint beneath the walker's shielding array. He fired. The sabot round punched through the hydraulics, sending a spray of metal and coolant into the air. The siege walker lurched, its balance momentarily thrown off. A deep mechanical groan echoed through the battlefield as its left leg gave out, slamming into the ground with a thunderous crash. Briggs whooped. "We got it!" But the fight wasn't over. The walker's main cannon winded, preparing another blast. Kane saw the glow intensifying. "If it fires now, we won't stand a chance," Kane muttered. Carter's voice crackled through the radio, sharp and urgent. "Finish it." Kane didn't need to be told twice. "Maddox, full charge." "Hayes, load the last sabot." Briggs blinked. "Wait, you're not." Carter's voice was iron. "We're ending this." The Abrams roared forward, charging toward the wreckage-strewn battlefield, weaving through burning debris and craters. The command ship's cannons locked onto them, its massive barrels glowing with the charge of its final strike. "We're not making it out of this, are we?" Maddox muttered. Kane didn't answer. The ship fired. Briggs wrenched the controls at the last possible second. The plasma blast scorched past them, detonating in a flash of heat and blinding light. The Abrams skidded sideways, the treads biting deep into the scorched earth. Kane seized the radio. "Fire!" Maddox squeezed the trigger. The final sabot round tore through the battlefield like a comet, streaking toward the Dominion's warship. The Zarth had built their command vessel for war, for planetary devastation. But they had never built it to withstand an old Earth weapon designed for one thing: destruction. The shell hit dead center, tearing through the hull, rupturing fuel lines, and igniting everything within. Fire blossomed outward, swallowing the ship in an apocalyptic inferno. The sky lit up as the warship split apart, its remains plummeting toward the ground in a cascade of burning wreckage. The battlefield went silent. The Dominion forces, witnessing their command destroyed, dropped their weapons. The once mighty warlords, so certain of their superiority, had been defeated by a single, outdated human war machine. Kane exhaled, his hands shaking slightly as he sat back against the cold steel of the cabin. The Abrams, battered, burned, and still standing, sat at the heart of the wreckage. A relic of war that had refused to die. Briggs laughed breathlessly. Holy hell! Maddox wiped sweat from his face. We just took down a warship with a tank. Carter's voice came through the radio, softer this time. Mission accomplished. Kane looked out over the field where human soldiers were emerging from cover, victorious. The Dominion was in full retreat. The Galactic Council, once so eager to mock Earth's military, would now remember this battle for generations. He allowed himself a small smile. They had won, not because of superior technology, not because of overwhelming numbers, but because they refused to lose. Briggs lit a cigar with shaking fingers, grinning. So, what do we do now? Kane smirked. We go home. And in the wreckage of a war they were never meant to win, the Abrams rumbled to life once more, rolling forward into history.